How does it feel to be back? It'll be by the time you get in the cage on Sunday night, it'll be a little bit over a year since you were inside the octagon. How does it feel to have the juices flowing and getting ready to get back in the cage?
Oh, you know what? It's a good feeling, especially just with the preparation, the time off, and doing everything the right way. My mind's in so much a better place than it's been the last couple of fights where I'm sitting there trying to, you're trying to make patchwork. I always felt like I was kind of running a car that wasn't optimal, and you're sitting there just trying to make adjustments. And okay, well, I can do this, and I can do that. And now this time, I mean, no one's 100% healthy for a fight, but my overall fitness level is such a much better level to where it was originally, like back in my youth.
Is this the closest you feel to 100% since the motorcycle accident?
No, I mean, I had a couple fights after the accident that, especially like the Nogueira one and Brock Lesnar one, that I felt very good. It wasn't until later on where just, like after the Dos Santos fight, I had 2 surgeries, things that needed to be addressed before the fight even, but, pushed through and took the fight. And then afterwards, then having a knee surgery before the Cormier fight that I had to pull out of another fight and then postpone. And then things started just kind of adding up to that. I remember there was, a Brock Lesnar fight that I had to postpone at one point because of a knee surgery. So there was about 4 or 5 surgeries that started occurring in 2009. It was just and not rehabbing in the right way. And instead of, heading things straight on and saying, hey, guys, I can't fight in 6 months because I'm going to need to take 3 months to, build this back up. Then I can start training again for the fight. But instead, just, jump right back into fight training. So instead of building something up, I started really adjusting my styles in my training to compensate for and not, for the injuries and just for just the normal wear and tear of fighting for, over a decade in the octagon.
Was there ever a point during all those, when you suffered injuries and had the surgeries, was there ever a point where you thought in your mind, maybe I should have taken that time off, considering what you said earlier?
Well, I mean, it's give and take. I mean, I never took a fight that I still didn't feel like I still had an opportunity to win the fight. That's why, I mean, I never really went back and after a fight go, well, it's because I'm injured. It's like, no, not really. I still, was throwing punches and I was still capable of submitting. It wasn't until when I took time off I really thought about it. But like, well, I'm not really giving it due justice because I'm not training the right way. I'm constantly compensating in that aspect of my overall program. And that's why I told people, I'm like, really at this point, if I get injured a week or two before a fight, that's no big deal. The adrenaline pumps. I mean, obviously it's not preferable, but it's not the worst thing. But what I had been doing at that point was starting camps off, still tending injuries and still not at 100% health. And so you have your whole 8-week, 10-week camp with an injury at the beginning. I'm like, this is worse. This isn't like, oh, you got 8 weeks till the fight, it'll heal a little bit. Like, no, it's not. We're going to just, then, in hindsight, looking at it, I'm like, being tough and just trying to suck it up was not really the best approach.
How close were you to retiring?
What's that?
How close were you to retiring after all this time off? Was there a point in your mind maybe this isn't what I want to do?
Absolutely. After the Overeem fight, I told my wife I was sitting there, and she was just, looking at it, and especially too because some of the jokes that even my friends or the training partners would make in the gym about, me, my injuries or just my state of overall health. What are you going to look like when you're 50, Frank? I mean, that's how you're moving right now. I'm like, no, you're right. And so I was like, well, maybe it is time. And so then I took about 2 months. I didn't do anything after the fight. Honestly, just sat on my butt, watched TV, hung out with the kids. We went on a couple of vacations. And it wasn't to that point where I was like, I took a yoga class with my wife. She's like, I think you just need to take yoga. I'm like, all right, cool. And it's at the gym that we train at. And I went in there, and I'm like one of 2 guys that are in there. I'm the only guy probably under the age of 55 in there. And a bunch of house moms and soccer moms and whatnot. And all of a sudden, like, they're doing certain positions like downward facing dog and just normal stuff. And about 10 minutes into it, I quit. I'm like, I can't hold this position here. And that's when it really dawned on me. I'm like, man, my overall fitness sucks. Not because I'm not fit as far as cardiovascularly and can't go and, I could go out in the weight room and pick certain exercises and look strong, but I would be like, I'd go over to someone and go, hey, you want to do an overhead press? I'm like, oh, sure, but let me use dumbbells because a barbell hurts my shoulder. And so I was constantly learning how to move around my injuries, but then it's like, well, when you're fighting and moving your own body, there's really not that choice. And I was stuck in a situation where someone's like, hey, just get in a push position and, stick your butt up in the air. And I'm like, I got wrist problems, I have a shoulder issue and an elbow, and I would just name it. It's like, well, how do I expect to be a top level fighter when I can't deal with these? So then that's when it hit me. I was like, to my wife, I told her, I said, you're right. I need just general fitness. I need to be able to, do a push-up, a handstand, be able to cartwheel again like I used to be able to, and not be in pain or have to warm up. The idea of actually even doing a handstand against the wall, it's like, well, let me warm up for a few minutes and stretch and do all these things. It's like, well, that's probably not saying much about your overall fitness, And so that's why at that point I just started a program of training myself up. And then at the same time, that's when the TRT stuff became like, hey, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. And that's what I thought originally was the root of my problem, was like, well, my hormones are low. And then that's why I really came to the conclusion that that really wasn't the source of my issue, but that more of a result of the issue of overtraining over the years. I think that's something that still guys in MMA nowadays, we don't have down packed yet. That's why so many fights get pulled off cards. We have so many different disciplines, and we're all trying to fit it all in one day. And really, I think MMA fighters out of any athlete are the most notoriously overtrained athletes in the whole professional world.
Are you still doing yoga?
Say again?
Are you still doing the yoga classes with your wife, or have you scaled back on it?
Well, no, actually, I did it a couple times with her, and I would actually, now when I go back, I have like a little Friday, they do a restorative yoga, and I love it, and I go in there and hang out with her, but for the most part, my other training now took over, and also, too, one of my trainers, Brent Brown, our actual weight training conditioning with him is a lot of moving my body around, full range of motion, and I even hired a gymnastics coach. His name is Uli Haju. He works at A+ Studios, and I see him 3 times a week where I actually work on just, obviously, I'm not trying to learn how to choke somebody from a gymnast, but I'm like, hey, I'd like to be able to just move more athletically again, and so just let me find out from somebody that's their profession is moving the body with its own weight, and so that type of stuff has really drastically helped out, reduce a lot of the issues I had.
A lot was made today regarding the news conference with Dana and Lorenzo. They announced year-round drug testing starting July 1st for all fighters, whether you're in the main event or the first fight on the card. What'd you make of today's announcement?
Well, I think it's a proactive step towards trying to address the issue with some of the tests that we've had. I think that maybe it'll make it better for everybody, because I think there's a little bit of an issue that if only a few guys are getting tested. I've always been on main cards and main events, and especially with the TRT, getting blood tested so much in the last couple of years, it's hard to even be tempted to hide under the radar, because I'm so have to be above water at any time I get my blood drawn and whatnot. And that's actually why I was a proponent. I'm like, why doesn't everybody have to do this? If we were all basically kind of evaluated, not that everybody needs TRT, but as far as leading up to the fight, if they drew our blood as much as they draw my blood, like that would completely remove any doubt or issues that anybody would have. Because I think the only time anybody ever really maybe come and contemplate whether they want to cheat or not is if they're afraid the other guy is. And that's a very understandable mindset. If you think your opponent is not above water, well then, you're probably not going to, then it makes that decision that much harder. But knowing that we're all going to be drug tested now, I think that just makes it that much better and easier for everybody to want to compete and sit there, and it just eliminates probably the only excuse I can think anybody would really ever have. It'd be like, well, you look at a professional baseball player, he's like, well, why did you do it? Well, he did. And it's like, okay, well, now we've eliminated that because everybody's being tested now, so we're all on the same playing field. So now this no longer has to be a temptation.
3 more questions, Frank, and thank you for the time today. And a name that always gets brought up associated with you is Brock Lesnar. A lot of rumblings about Brock maybe after WWE WrestleMania. We'll come back to the UFC, and a lot of people link you guys together. If he does come back, do you think that fight makes sense?
It can. It depends, obviously, how successful I am Sunday. If I come off with a win, then I think it makes a better argument. If not, then I think that pretty much lays that fight to the wayside.
You want to face him? If victorious, is that something that will you call Brock out on Sunday?
If I'm successful, I don't know. I haven't really thought that far. I'm so focused on making sure I get this one win that honestly, I know a lot of guys say that they don't look past somebody, but they still do think about it. But honestly, there is nothing else if I don't win on Sunday.
How big of a threat is Bigfoot Silva to you on Sunday, and what was your reaction when the UFC called you to fight Bigfoot?
I like the idea just because, he still has a very good name. So, going out there and competing and having to win over Bigfoot would still help rebound me in the right direction. Where taking a fight of somebody that is not well known or an unknown fighter, getting a win over him is still a possibility to take a loss. And really there's nothing to gain because the win is like, well, that guy wasn't even in the top 30, And so fighting Bigfoot, I think, he's ranked higher than I am, so it's definitely a step forward for me to be victorious. And I think he poses a big threat. I mean, the guy's been 5 rounds in some very tough fights. He's very very big heart, very motivated to fight. And so a lot of heavyweights, I've seen Bigfoot, watch a lot of film on him, and you'll see in fights where the guys get the jump on him. They catch him with a shot. They're able to, take a lead, and Bigfoot never really panics. He comes back, and he's very meticulous about fighting hard, and he never throws in the towel. I've watched him, in fights where a lot of heavyweights I don't think would have made it out of the first round, and he comes back and is victorious later on.
When you envision the fight in your head, Frank, how do you see the fight playing out?
I think Bigfoot's so strong and so adverse at jiu-jitsu, and I think that he keeps his guard up, so he's not the easiest guy to land a good shot on. I think that I honestly, for seeing this fight go in 25 minutes, I think that I'm more technical and I can move around and use my mobility to frustrate him and keep him from being able to really get any offense going. So I just feel like I'll just be able to be technically superior to him for 5 rounds in a row.
Frank, thank you for the time and the best of luck on Sunday.